Good evening and welcome to Ideas at Work and Beyond. I'm the host this evening. My name is Elizabeth Putnam and I am the online editor at the News-Times here in Danbury. And tonight my first guest is Tom Soddy, the Democratic caucus leader here in Danbury. And then later on we will be joined by Police Chief Al Baker as well as the Honorable Mayor Mark Boughton. Hello, Tom. How are you?
Great. How are you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
I thought I'd start off and let our viewers know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see, I'm serving in my fourth term on the Common Council. I have the honor of being the Democratic caucus leader. My colleagues on the Democratic colleagues elected me as that this past term. In addition, the job that actually pays the bills is the Attorney General's office. Yes. I have the pleasure of working for Dick Blumenthal as an Assistant Attorney General on consumer fraud cases for Connecticut citizens. And also I took on, about a year and a half ago, a new position. I joined the U.S. Army Reserve JAG Corps on a direct commission, and I've been doing my training over the last 16, 17 months. Ironically, some of it at Fort Dix.
Tell me a little bit about that. I understand that you were just there a couple weeks ago. How do you feel in light of the news that has been brought out about the homegrown terrorists?
Well, there was actually a cartoon in the News-Times, ironically today, that sort of laid out the irony of soldiers, reservists like myself and National Guard personnel are trained at Fort Dix, and they're trained to go off into combat, whether it's Afghanistan or Iraq, and the cartoon made light of that when a commander was telling a soldier, we're sending you, to the front or to fight in the war, and the soldier asked where, and he told him the front gate at Fort Dix. Yeah. It's somewhat disconcerting. I was at that fort 2 weeks ago for a field exercise for several days, and you don't think about those things as being a threat here at home, but it is important for us to remain vigilant, not to be in panic mode, but just to be vigilant. Right. And it's vigilance that will prevent, I think, catastrophes from happening, such as this one.
Now, as a member of the military, you were looking at what the city's policy is for leave for employees, correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what the city has now and what you and fellow Democrats on the Common Council are looking to do.
Well, the Democratic caucus has proposed that the council, the mayor appointed an ad hoc committee to review our current military leave policy. And I do have to say that after 9/11 in early October, the city did, under the mayor's tutelage, put into place a fairly comprehensive military leave policy that did fit into the needs at that time.
Okay.
However, 6, 7 years close have passed, and 4 years of a war overseas have changed some of the needs, I think, that we need to address. And while I have not been deployed, soldiers in my unit have, and one of the biggest problems is oftentimes they get paid less when they're deployed than their civilian job paid. Right. So I think what's important is to expand our differential coverage. So if a soldier who's a captain is going to be paid $50,000 or $55,000 in a combat area, and their pay with the city was maybe $65,000 or $70,000, the city would pay the difference. We currently do that, and to his credit, the mayor had put that in place. But it should be expanded beyond, I believe it's 180 days now, I think, to the full time that the soldier is deployed and on active duty.
Whatever their tour.
Whatever the tour is, because it's consistently expanding based on the needs and the current accelerated operations tempo. And that is just, it's common sense, because these soldiers, these reservists, soldiers, sailors, marines, whoever they may be, we can't put them in a financial position where it'd be detrimental for them to be able to serve the country.
Now, do you know how many city employees would fall into this category?
That would actually be something that the committee would look at to see what type of financial impact. I think it really is minimal, the amount of reservists. And in particular, you wouldn't have them all deployed at the same time. It'd probably be periodic.
It'd be staggered, too, as well. Now, is there any chance that you will get deployed?
Any soldier, any member of the military is always told that there's always a chance that anyone in the current situation could be deployed. So you just don't know. You always prepare, and that's why I was at Fort Dix training. All soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guard personnel, everyone trains in case of a deployment. But the one thing to keep in mind is that policy that the Democratic caucus, and I think members of the Republican caucus across the aisle agree with looking at it as well, would not apply to me. I don't get paid by the city. So it's not self-serving. Elected officials, such as myself, wouldn't be covered.
Okay. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the parade ordinance in Danbury. It's been a very contentious issue among a variety of groups. And on May 1st, for those of you who don't know, it was passed, but only for about 12 hours, I believe. And then one of the Corporation Council members found that there was an error that had occurred, and it rescinded or voided the ordinance. Where are we going forward now? Is it going to be again on the agenda in June?
Well, really, to address it, we have to take a step back.
Okay.
What happened, and it is a fairly arcane, complex parliamentary procedure, bunch of sort of mumbo-jumbo, I think, at times. But really, in essence, the city charter says that the mayor can vote only when he's voting or she's voting to break a tie.
Okay.
What happened was, while the council was debating the parade ordinance, I had offered an amendment, and I'll go into that. And then Councilwoman Saraceno had offered a motion to recommit the ordinance back to committee because there was so much discussion about some of the details and concerns. So let's rehash it a little bit more in committee.
Right.
Well, that passed 10-9. However, the mayor cast a vote which made it 10-10. Well, when there's a tie, the vote doesn't pass.
Right.
So I had objected to that, was overruled by Corporation Counsel, the city attorney, and the mayor in interpreting Robert's Rules of Order, saying that the chair of a committee or a body can vote to break a tie or to affect the outcome of a vote.
Right.
In other words, to make a tie.
Exactly.
But our city charter doesn't say that. Section 3.2 of the charter says the mayor can only vote. The mayor has no vote except in case of a tie. So the next morning, that was realized. I knew that that was the case, but I didn't know the section offhand. And so once it was realized, Corporation Counsel sent a letter to the mayor. The mayor then distributed that information to the council members, saying that the ordinance had not passed because of those improper votes in contravention of the charter. And so we set the clock back and redebated in June on a motion to reconsider.
Reconsider.
Now, I'll tell you that it's my position that what the council should do is go back to the last legitimate act that the council did or engaged in debating that ordinance, which was to approve Councilwoman Saraceno's motion to recommit, which passed 10-9. Okay. So there's some debate going back and forth on that, and we'll see how that flushes out
in June.
Down the road.
Okay.
But going back to why there was so much debate on the ordinance, the one thing that the public really needs to understand about this ordinance is that it does not address spontaneous or impromptu demonstrations or parades.
But isn't that the purpose of the ordinance? Wasn't that the impetus for it?
That's the impetus, but not the purpose. And that's the irony here, is many people, many members of the public came and spoke with heartfelt testimony before the council saying, we're glad you're going to pass this because this ordinance is needed to stop these spontaneous, these impromptu parades that blocked our driveways, blocked our streets, blocked our roads.
Right.
It doesn't do it.
No.
In fact, the actual text of the ordinance says it specifically doesn't apply to impromptu parades and assemblies. And some might say, well, it's not impromptu because a few people talked about getting together. Well, you know what? Prior planning, which is what the ordinance requires, prior planning, state law, it says prior planning is not a few people discussing it, a maybe. Substantial step to the execution of the plan.
Exactly.
So the irony is that the impetus for bringing this matter before the council is the very thing that's not addressed by this ordinance. It's not a bad ordinance.
Okay.
We do need to oversee and regulate, to some extent, parades. But it goes beyond that. It regulates public assemblies. And public assemblies means a gathering of 26 people or more in a public place that may preclude other people from being in that same public place at the same time. So the amendment...
No matter where in the city, even...
In a park.
Okay.
On a street, on a sidewalk. And the key thing with the streets is, and the chief said this, and the deputy chief said this during committee and in front of the council, that if someone's blocking streets, blocking roads, blocking driveways, there are traffic laws that apply.
Absolutely.
Other health, safety, and welfare laws. These people can be cited for that, and they will be. And the chief and the mayor have said people would be for that. So that's not going to happen under our existing laws. So the amendment would have eliminated the public assembly section of the parade ordinance and just applied to parades on streets and sidewalks. Would have raised the number from 26 people to 100 people. It's not 25, 26, or 50 people that's a problem. It's hundreds of people that's a problem. Right. And then finally would have only applied to streets and sidewalks and would have changed the language throughout the text of the ordinance. So that's what led to the big debate, all the rigmarole, and the confusion over voting.
Right.
And now we have to go through the whole thing again.
So one question I have is, we've been involved a lot with the bus strike going on, been covering that for the News-Times, and obviously there are picketers, there's a picket line. Would something like that be required to have a permit if you were a union member?
There would be a permit requirement the fee would be waived because it's a First Amendment issue.
Okay.
But that was one of the significant objections that I had, that picket lines, rallies that where more than 25 people are gathered, where they may be blocking a sidewalk somewhat temporarily, or even a walkway, an unpaved or cement-covered walkway in a public park. So those people would have to notify the chief ahead of time, get some sort of either permit, whether the fee is waived or not waived would depend upon what they're going to be speaking about.
Right.
It just went far beyond the intended purpose, which really was to focus on parades that block streets and sidewalks, and it doesn't address impromptu events.
How would you address impromptu?
You really can't, except to apply the existing laws when people block people's driveways and sidewalks. If I parked my car in front of someone's driveway and blocked it, I would be issued a citation for improperly parking a vehicle in front of a driveway. If I'm walking down the street or standing in the intersection of White Street and Main and blocking traffic, I'm breaking laws.
Right.
There's laws in the book.
But when there's such a large number of people that are out there celebrating or gathering of some sort, what about, you think of manpower and you think of the police, and are there enough people? Then you think of overtime costs and the burden to the taxpayer.
Let's take a perfect example of that, homecoming.
Okay.
Homecoming, spontaneous explosions of students, rallying after the team just won.
Right.
Beeping their horns, riding in the cars with streamers, going down, up and down Main Street. It used to happen more often, and we had some people testify before us back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There were many more of those impromptu homecoming parades. Well, reasonable reason has to be applied. If something's getting out of control, the police will clamp down. If it's not unreasonable, if there is just some short term to it and they can move people along without interfering with their neighbors, exercising of their own rights to use the streets, that'll be considered. Basically, we have a social compact. People should respect other people's rights within the community. My rights end where yours begin, and I shouldn't intrude on your rights and vice versa.
Right.
And there are plenty of laws in the books to deal with that.
I just want to take a second, too, to remind our viewers that you can call in and ask a question of Tom Soddy, and the number is 792-4101.
Even if you disagree with me, I'd be more than happy to try to answer the questions.
So please call in. Please call in. We'd love to hear what you have to say. The other issue, other than the parade ordinance, that I really wanted to discuss with you was overdevelopment in the city of Danbury. Just recently, I believe today, was the opening of Elmer's Diner by the North Street shopping area. And that area in particular is notorious for traffic congestion. And you hear a lot of people talk about overdevelopment in residential areas. Do you have any, what are your main concerns with that?
Well, I mean, Elmer's Diner, and it's wrong to pick on, I think, one business or one development, because it's the combination, it's the totality of all the circumstances. But that just brought it, I think, to the forefront for a lot of people, because North Street in that area is so congested, particularly in rush hour when you're waiting and you have to wait for several cycles to actually get through the traffic light at the bottom of the hill. I think there is a problem. The problem is not that members of boards and commissions are necessarily just being too loose with their votes. The problem is with some of the regulations and laws and ordinances that are in place, which need to be changed to give our boards and commissions stronger tools to limit overdevelopment, to limit development to a reasonable level. I think also, and I disagree with the mayor on this, of providing tax incentives for people to build residential developments. I think it applies well to commercial and industrial developments. That increases our tax base, creates jobs. But residential developments receiving tax breaks to give incentives. There's a lot of profit in residential development. I don't even think they need tax breaks for incentives. But I think we need a comprehensive review of our zoning regulations, our traffic regulations, our planning regulations, in order to see where we need to tighten up the rules so that what occurred in the past doesn't keep occurring in Danbury with regard to overdevelopment.
This one specific example is the BRT development on Crosby Street that is now going to be housing for college students. Now that, the tax deferral or the incentive, whatever you want to call it.
A lot of names for it.
Right. It was never rescinded. So moving forward, is there any debate continuing with that, or is that just a pretty much
Sure, there actually is a council committee that's going to be meeting within the next week or so to debate that, and then whatever that committee comes up with will then go to the full council for debate. So that's still a very open issue right now. I don't know if you have a caller there.
Oh, I do have a caller.
Yes. Why don't we go to the caller rather than listen to me talk?
Hello, welcome to Ideas at Work and Beyond.
Hi, Councilman Sadi. It's Lynn Waller.
How are you, Lynn?
Fine. I was at an ad hoc committee the other night, and I was hearing conversation by, I believe, the Director of Public Works, and he was mentioning the fact that our water is beginning to get awfully tight with all the overdevelopment. If you change ordinances for the planning and zoning groups to try to limit development, isn't that something that we should be looking at in a fairly short order? From what he was giving me the impression that with all of the condominiums that are there and are already on the books, we are within 15% of our maximum amount of water capacity.
Lynn, that's a very important point. I mean, let's look at it. Water is our most precious resource. Everything basically comes from water. And I would think that any review should include looking at our public utilities, our water and our sewer, and the ability to handle development. And beyond that, it should happen sooner rather than later. And in fact, there is a pending proposal before the council to have a comprehensive review of the master plan, as well as hopefully that there'll be a comprehensive review of the various zoning laws, regs, everything. And to respond further to Lynn's question, it would be from soup to nuts. This is not just focusing on traffic or on water. It is a comprehensive review.
How close are we to reaching critical mass in terms of our water supply? We're good to go for a while, or do we have some concerns?
I don't think we're at a crisis mode now.
Okay.
But you have to plan for the future.
Right.
You know, don't wait for the crisis to happen.
And don't sell to all the surrounding communities.
Yes, that's another thing.
All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Yeah, another caller. Okay.
Another caller. Hello, welcome to Ideas at Work and Beyond.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. What's your question, sir?
Great. Mr. Sadi, I wanted to talk about the sex offender ordinance.
Yes, sex offender ordinance.
Back in December, the council approved the sex offender ordinance, but you tried to offer an amendment to fix, I think, what you called zone hopping.
Yes.
And it was, your amendment was shot down, but an ad hoc committee was created to address that issue. I wanted to find out where we stand at with the ad hoc committee and if you can inform the public a little more about your amendment.
Basically, to recap what the call, I'm not sure if it was picked up on the mic. The Common Council passed a sex offender ordinance. Notice will go out from the city to people as sex offenders who are registered in the community. The issue was that there was a language problem in the ordinance which would allow a sex offender to be able to go from one zone to another without it being a violation. It said, which we called zone hopping. So what we tried to do, and I offered an amendment to clarify and clean up that language so that if they went from one zone and were cited, given a written warning or verbal warning, that if they went to another zone, protect zone, they would then be in violation of the ordinance. The way the language currently reads, they can sort of hop from zone to zone as long as they don't go back to the one where they were before. So that went to a committee, and we're still waiting for the ad hoc committee to meet. That's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Is there any schedule ad hoc? Is it on the books, or?
As far as I know, it has not been scheduled, and it is the committee chairs that really hold the reins on scheduling ad hoc committees. So if people have issues that are before ad hoc committees, they should contact the committee chairs that they can find out from the city clerk through the city website, either by email or telephone, and contact that chairperson and tell them to call the committee to order.
Now, how long has it been? How long has it been since they've been waiting for this?
A few months now. We've been waiting. I know the News Times covered it when the story first broke. And committees can usually meet in fairly short order. This is a fairly straightforward. It was really just changing 2 or 3 words. So we hope that it will meet soon. A little disappointed it hasn't met. Maybe the chief and the mayor in the next session can address that.
Okay. Any further question?
No, that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. I think that's all. In terms of the sex offender ordinance, too, was there legality questions about the ACLU had?
Well, you know, there's certain, advocacy groups always raise issues, and as a practicing lawyer, and I don't work, I'm not a member of the ACLU, I work for the state, so.
Very different.
Yeah. That being said, full and fair disclosure, I didn't really find constitutional issues there or First Amendment issues with regard to the notice. I just wanted to make sure that the language was properly cast. So it really wasn't as much a First Amendment issue. And someone commits a crime, that crime is public record. They have to register under state law, and the Attorney General Blumenthal, defended the registry when a group sued, got it removed from the website of the Department of Public Safety, and our office, the Attorney General's office, got it put back up, and it was found to be constitutional.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. It was a pleasure to sit down with you.
Absolutely a pleasure. I look forward to hopefully
yes.
doing this again, and you know, I'm sure with all the topics in the city, we could go on for much more than a half an hour.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to take a little bit of break for some news and weather, and then coming up next is Police Chief Al Baker and Mayor Mark Boughton.